Detective Sarah Mitchell had seen her share of crime scenes in 15 years with the Ohio State Police, but nothing prepared her for the Henderson home on that cold February night. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. Home invasion, multiple victims, child witness. She arrived to find the quiet suburban street transformed into a chaos of flashing lights, yellow crime scene tape, and neighbors clutching bathrobes, their faces pale with shock. The front door hung askew on broken hinges. Sarah stepped carefully over shattered glass that glittered like deadly diamonds under the porch light. Inside, the scene spoke of violence and terror. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. Overturned furniture, broken lamps, family photos trampled on the hardwood floor. A child's coloring book lay open near the stairs, crayons scattered like fallen soldiers. But it was the kitchen that made Sarah's stomach turn. Blood smeared across the white countertop in a crimson arc. More blood pooled near the refrigerator, already turning brown at the edges. Forensics techs moved silently through the space, photographing, measuring, collecting. The lead tech, a woman named Rodriguez, caught Sarah's eye and shook her head grimly. "Parents are at County General," Rodriguez said quietly. "Father took a beating, fractured skull, broken ribs, punctured lung. Mother has defensive wounds on her arms and a concussion. They're both stable, but barely." She paused, her voice dropping even lower. "The little girl, she's physically unharmed." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Physically unharmed didn't mean unharmed. She knew that better than most. "Where is she?" Sarah asked. "Grandmother took her to Children's Hospital for evaluation, but Detective," Rodriguez hesitated, "the closet upstairs, you need to see it." Sarah climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The master bedroom showed signs of struggle, drawers yanked open, jewelry boxes emptied, mattress half off the frame. But it was the small hallway closet that stopped Sarah cold. The door stood open barely 6 inches. Inside, pushed behind winter coats and storage boxes, was a space just large enough for a small child. A tiny pink sneaker lay abandoned just outside, as if kicked off in panic. Sarah knelt down, peering into the narrow space. She could see small handprints on the wall, child-sized prints pressed into the drywall as if Emma had braced herself there, frozen in terror. Neighbors heard screaming around 9:15, Rodriguez said from behind her. Police arrived at 9:47. Best we can figure, the child was in there for at least 2 hours, maybe longer. Sarah closed her eyes, imagining a 3-year-old girl crammed into that dark space, listening to her parents' screams, hearing strange men's voices, footsteps, crashes, not understanding but knowing, the way children always know, that something terrible was happening. 2 hours. 120 minutes of pure terror for a toddler who should have been asleep, dreaming whatever 3-year-olds dream about. By midnight, Sarah was at Children's Hospital. The pediatric wing was too cheerful, bright murals of cartoon animals, colorful signs, the faint smell of antiseptic masked by artificial vanilla. A nurse directed her to a private room at the end of the hall. Through the door's window, Sarah saw an elderly woman, Emma's grandmother, Martha Henderson, sitting in a chair, her face carved with grief. And on the hospital bed, almost swallowed by white sheets and surrounded by monitoring equipment, was Emma. She was tiny, with dark curls and huge brown eyes that stared at nothing. A stuffed rabbit sat in her lap, but her hands didn't hold it. They just lay there, limp. A pediatric psychiatrist named Dr. Patel stood nearby, making notes on a tablet. Sarah knocked softly and entered. Martha looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Anything?" Sarah asked Dr. Patel quietly. The psychiatrist shook her head. "Not a word, not even a cry. She's in acute traumatic mutism, a dissociative response to overwhelming psychological trauma. Her brain has essentially shut down verbal communication as a protective mechanism." "How long before she speaks again?" "There's no timeline, could be days, weeks, months, or longer. Each child is different." Dr. Patel looked at Emma with professional concern that barely masked deeper sadness. "We've tried play therapy, art therapy, even music. She's completely withdrawn. The trauma was too severe." Sarah approached the bed slowly. "Emma, sweetheart, my name is Sarah. I'm a police officer and I'm going to find the people who scared you and your mommy and daddy. Can you help me do that?" Emma's eyes shifted toward Sarah but didn't focus. There was no recognition, no response, just that terrible blank stare. "She's been like this since her grandmother picked her up," Martha whispered, her voice breaking. "My grandbaby. She was such a chatterbox, always singing, always asking questions. Now, nothing. It's like they stole her voice." Sarah spent another 20 minutes trying different approaches, but Emma remained silent, locked somewhere deep inside herself where the monsters couldn't reach, but neither could the people trying to help. Back at the station at 2 a.m., Sarah spread crime scene photos across her desk. Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera had captured two figures approaching the Henderson home, both male, both wearing masks and gloves. They'd been professionals, or at least experienced. They knew to avoid cameras, knew how to disable the alarm system, knew the family would be home. But they'd made one mistake. They hadn't known about Emma. The suspects, identified through partial fingerprints and a distinctive snake tattoo visible on one man's wrist in the footage, were picked up within 48 hours. Derek Vance, 34, with a rap sheet including assault and burglary. His accomplice Marcus "Snake" Torelli, 29, equally violent, equally dangerous. But the case was circumstantial without Emma's testimony. The fingerprint was on an outside doorframe, good but not definitive. The tattoo match was strong but not ironclad. A decent defense attorney could create reasonable doubt. The prosecutor, David Ramirez, had been blunt. Without the child identifying them, without her being able to tell us what happened in that house, we might get them on breaking and entering. They'll do maybe 5 years and be back on the streets. 5 years for destroying a family, for leaving a 3-year-old girl so traumatized she couldn't speak. Now, 72 hours after the attack, Sarah sat in the dark squad room, staring at Emma's kindergarten photo that Martha had provided. In the picture, Emma was laughing, gap-toothed and joyful, holding up a painting she'd made. That little girl seemed like a different person from the hollow-eyed child in the hospital bed. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 1 week. 7 days to get Emma to speak, to identify her attackers, to give prosecutors what they needed to keep monsters locked away. 7 days to perform a miracle. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Patel. Emma released to grandmother's care, still nonverbal, recommended intensive trauma therapy, prognosis uncertain. Sarah put her head in her hands. Somewhere in this city, Derek Vance and Marcus Torelli were sitting in cells, probably laughing, probably confident that a traumatized 3-year-old would never be able to testify against them. Probably right. She looked at the case file one more time, at the photo of that tiny pink sneaker, at the handprints in the closet, at sweet Emma's face. "I'll find a way," Sarah whispered to the empty room. "I promise you, sweetheart, I'll find a way." But as she drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, past houses where families slept safely, she had no idea what that way could possibly be. Child psychologists had tried everything. Emma's loving grandmother couldn't reach her. Medical professionals were stumped. The clock was ticking. Justice hung in the balance, and a little girl remained trapped in silence, her voice stolen by 2 men who now held all the cards. Detective Sarah Mitchell didn't know it yet, but the answer to her prayers would come from the most unexpected source, and it would have 4 legs, a tail, and a badge of its own. Officer Marcus Webb straightened his uniform as he walked through the main entrance of Children's Hospital, his K-9 partner Rex trotting obediently beside him. It was supposed to be a routine community outreach visit, the kind the department scheduled regularly to improve public relations and show kids that police officers and their dogs were friendly, approachable, helpful. Marcus had done dozens of these demonstrations over his 5 years with the K-9 unit, and they usually went the same way. Excited children squealing, parents taking photos, Rex performing his repertoire of tricks while Marcus explained police work. But today felt different the moment they entered the pediatric wing. The usual chaos of the children's ward was muted. Nurses moved quietly through halls decorated with cheerful murals that seemed almost mocking given the circumstances. Marcus had heard about the home invasion. Everyone in the department had. The Henderson case was all anyone talked about. A family destroyed, suspects in custody, and a 3-year-old witness locked in traumatic silence. Officer Webb, a young nurse with kind eyes, approached. "We're so glad you're here. The kids have been looking forward to this all week. Well, most of them." She led Marcus and Rex to a large recreational room where about 15 children in hospital gowns and pajamas waited with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some bounced with excitement. Others sat withdrawn, dealing with their own traumas and medical challenges. Marcus had learned long ago that children's hospitals held stories that could break your heart if you let them. "All right, everyone," Marcus announced with practiced cheer. "This is Rex. He's been my partner for 5 years, and he's one of the smartest dogs you'll ever meet, who wants to see what he can do." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus ran through the demonstration. Rex responded to commands in English and German. He demonstrated tracking skills using a volunteer's hidden shoe. He showed his gentleness by carefully taking treats from tiny hands. The children laughed and clapped, and for a moment the weight of their various struggles seemed to lift. But Marcus kept noticing one little girl. She sat alone in the corner, partially hidden behind a fabric play structure. Dark curls framed a pale face with enormous brown eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing at once. She clutched a stuffed rabbit but didn't seem to actually hold it. Her hands were just there, limp and unresponsive. While other children laughed and called out questions, she remained absolutely still and silent. Something about her pulled at Marcus's chest. During a break, while kids petted Rex under careful supervision, the therapy coordinator, a woman named Angela Martinez, appeared at Marcus's elbow. "That's Emma Henderson," Angela said quietly, following his gaze. "She's not officially admitted, but her grandmother brings her for therapy sessions. She hasn't spoken since the attack 4 days ago." Marcus felt his breath catch. This was her, the child witness everyone was talking about, the little girl whose testimony could lock up 2 violent criminals or let them walk free. "We've tried everything," Angela continued, her voice heavy with frustration and sadness. "Play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, even animal-assisted therapy with our resident therapy dog, Biscuit. She doesn't respond to anything. It's like she's built walls so high that nothing can reach her." Marcus watched Emma for a long moment. She wasn't looking at the other children or the adults. Her gaze was fixed entirely on Rex. "Can I try something?" Marcus asked. Angela hesitated, then nodded. "At this point, we're open to anything. Her grandmother is in the consultation room down the hall." Marcus dismissed the other children gently, promising to return for another visit soon. As parents and nurses led the kids away, he sat down on the floor about 10 feet from where Emma sat. Rex, sensing his handler's shift in energy, settled beside him with professional calm. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, not looking directly at Emma. He'd learned that direct eye contact could feel threatening to traumatized children. "My name is Marcus, and this is Rex. We're police officers, but we're not here for police work today. We're just here to visit." No response. Emma's eyes remained on Rex, but she didn't move. "Rex is really good at his job," Marcus continued conversationally. "He can find people who are lost. He can track bad guys, but you know what his favorite thing is? Just sitting with people who need a friend." Marcus gave a subtle hand signal, and Rex slowly, very slowly, began to move forward. Not directly toward Emma, but at an angle, as if he were simply exploring the room. The big German shepherd sniffed at toys, investigated a bookshelf, all while gradually, casually closing the distance. Emma's body tensed slightly, but she didn't flee. Her eyes tracked Rex's every movement. Rex has been through special training, Marcus said. He knows how to be gentle, he knows how to be patient, and he's really, really good at keeping secrets. Some of the people he helps tell him things they can't tell anyone else. Rex was now about 5 feet from Emma. He settled down on the floor, resting his large head on his paws, looking for all the world like he had nowhere else to be and all the time in the world. His dark eyes gazed at Emma with the kind of non-judgmental acceptance that only dogs seem capable of. For 3 full minutes nothing happened. Marcus barely breathed. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emma leaned forward just an inch, then another. Her hand, the one not clutching the stuffed rabbit, extended slowly toward Rex. "That's it," Marcus whispered. "He won't hurt you, I promise." Emma's fingertips touched the top of Rex's head. The dog's tail gave one gentle thump against the floor, acknowledgement without overwhelm. Emma's fingers slid down to Rex's soft ear, and for the first time since Marcus had seen her, something flickered in those enormous brown eyes. Not quite emotion, but the shadow of it, a crack in the wall. Marcus's mind was racing. He'd read articles about this, trauma therapy involving animals, specifically dogs. There was something about the non-threatening presence of a well-trained dog that could reach people when humans couldn't. Dogs didn't judge, didn't push, didn't expect anything. They just existed alongside you, offering silent support. Officer Webb, Angela had returned, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. In 4 days of intensive therapy, that's the first voluntary movement she's made toward anything. Beside Angela stood an elderly woman, Emma's grandmother, Martha, her hand pressed to her mouth as she watched her granddaughter stroke Rex's fur. An idea was forming in Marcus's mind, a crazy idea, an unprecedented idea, but as he watched Emma, still silent, still traumatized, but somehow more present than she'd been moments before, he knew he had to try. That evening, Marcus burst into Detective Sarah Mitchell's office without knocking. Sarah looked up from her desk, startled, as Marcus dropped into the chair across from her. "I know how to get Emma to testify," he said. Sarah set down her pen. "Marcus, child psychologists have been." "Rex," Marcus interrupted. "The answer is Rex." "Your dog." "My partner," Marcus corrected. "I was at Children's Hospital today doing a demonstration. Emma was there." Sarah, she didn't respond to any of the humans trying to help her, but when Rex approached her, something changed. She touched him. She engaged with him. There's research on this. Trauma victims, especially children, sometimes respond to therapy animals when traditional methods fail. Sarah leaned back, processing. "You're suggesting we bring your K9 to a courtroom." "I'm suggesting we bring Emma's lifeline to a courtroom. That preliminary hearing is in 6 days. We have 6 days to help her feel safe enough to identify her attackers. Traditional therapy hasn't worked, but Rex," Marcus leaned forward intently. "I saw it today, Sarah. For just a moment, that little girl came back, and it was because of a dog who offered her something no human could, complete, unconditional safety. The judge would never allow it. The defense would have a field day. It's unprecedented." So was a 3-year-old hiding in a closet for 2 hours listening to her parents being beaten, Marcus said sharply. So was 2 monsters potentially walking free because their victim is too traumatized to speak. "Sarah, we have to try." Detective Mitchell stared at him for a long moment, then picked up her phone. "Let me call Prosecutor Ramirez. If he's willing to argue it, we might have a shot." By midnight, an emergency meeting had been convened in the prosecutor's conference room. David Ramirez, a seasoned prosecutor with 20 years of experience, listened to Marcus's proposal with a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. "It's never been done in this jurisdiction," Ramirez said. "The defense will argue it's prejudicial, that a police dog creates sympathy, that it's a circus. But is it legal? Marcus pressed. Ramirez rubbed his temples. Therapy animals have been allowed in courtrooms in other states. There's precedent for comfort items and support persons for child witnesses. Technically, yes, it could be argued as legal, but Judge Chen is old school. She'll need convincing. Then let me convince her, Marcus said. Let me show her what I saw today. Give Emma a chance. Sarah spoke up. We need to move fast. Emma needs time with Rex before the hearing. If we're going to do this, we need approval immediately, and we need to start building that bond tomorrow. Ramirez looked at the case file open before him. Photos of the crime scene, of Emma's parents' injuries, of the smirking suspects who thought they'd gotten away with it. He thought about his own daughter, safe at home, the same age as Emma. He thought about justice and mercy and the weight of his oath. I'll file a motion first thing in the morning, he said finally. Officer Webb, you better be right about this. Marcus thought of Emma's fingers in Rex's fur, of that tiny spark of life returning to her eyes. I know I am. As they left the building in the early morning hours, Marcus knelt beside Rex, scratching behind his partner's ears. You up for the most important job of your career, buddy, he murmured. Rex's tail wagged, his eyes bright and intelligent. Somewhere across the city, Emma lay awake in her grandmother's house, staring at the ceiling, trapped in silence. She didn't know that help was coming. She didn't know that hope had 4 legs and a badge. But in 6 days, a preliminary hearing would determine the course of justice. And against all odds, a little girl and a police dog were about to change everything. The morning sun streamed through Martha Henderson's living room windows as she opened the front door to find Officer Marcus Webb standing on her porch, Rex sitting calmly at his side. Martha's eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. Another sleepless night listening for Emma's cries that never came, watching for signs of recovery that remained maddeningly absent. Thank you for agreeing to this, Mrs. Henderson, Marcus said gently. I know it's unconventional. Martha's hand trembled as she gestured them inside. Unconventional is the least of my worries, officer. My granddaughter hasn't spoken in 5 days. She barely eats. She doesn't sleep through the night. Yesterday, I found her standing in front of the closet in the guest room, just staring at it for 20 minutes. The therapists say she's re-experiencing the trauma over and over in her mind. Her voice cracked. If your dog can reach her when nothing else has, then please, God, let him try. The house was modest but warm, filled with family photos that now seemed like artifacts from another life. Pictures of Emma laughing at birthday parties, playing at the beach, hugging her parents. Marcus noticed Martha had removed any photos showing the family's previous home, the crime scene that had shattered their world. Where is she? Marcus asked. Her room. She spends most of her time there now, sitting by the window. Martha led them down a hallway decorated with Emma's crayon drawings. I've tried everything. Her favorite foods, her favorite movies, her toys. Nothing reaches her. It's like she's here but not here, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, Marcus said. Trauma creates a disconnect. Her mind is protecting her the only way it knows how, by shutting down. But sometimes the right connection can build a bridge back. They stopped outside a bedroom door covered with stickers and a wooden sign reading Emma's room in purple letters. Through the crack, Marcus could see the little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor by the window, that same stuffed rabbit in her lap, staring out at the backyard where a tire swing hung motionless in the still air. Let me try something, Marcus said softly. Mrs. Henderson, could you give us about 30 minutes? Sometimes children respond better without adults they're trying to protect hovering nearby. Martha hesitated, maternal instinct warring with desperate hope, then nodded. I'll be in the kitchen. Call if you need anything. Marcus waited until Martha's footsteps faded, then sat down in the hallway outside Emma's door, his back against the wall. Rex settled beside him with a soft huff, his professional demeanor never wavering despite the unusual assignment. Emma, Marcus called gently, not entering the room. "It's Officer Marcus from the hospital. Remember me? I brought Rex to visit you. He's been asking about you." No response, but Marcus hadn't expected one. This was about patience, about creating a safe space, about letting Emma control the interaction. "Rex and I are just going to sit out here for a while," Marcus continued conversationally. "We don't need to come in unless you want us to. We're just here, okay? Rex says he had fun meeting you the other day. He doesn't get to meet a lot of kids who are as gentle as you were." 5 minutes passed, then 10. Marcus talked occasionally, sharing innocuous stories about Rex's training, about funny things that happened on patrol, about nothing and everything. His voice was a calm, steady anchor in Emma's storm. At the 15-minute mark, Marcus heard a small sound, the soft pad of bare feet on carpet. Through the door opening, he could see Emma had moved. She was standing now, closer to the door, watching them through the gap. Rex's ears perked up, but the well-trained dog didn't move. He simply looked toward the door with those intelligent brown eyes, his tail giving one gentle wag of recognition. "Hey there," Marcus said, still not moving. "Want to come say hi to Rex, or he can come in there if you'd prefer, whatever makes you comfortable." Another long silence. Then slowly, Emma stepped into the doorway. She looked even smaller than she had at the hospital, wearing oversized pajamas covered with cartoon butterflies. Her dark hair was tangled, and her eyes held that same thousand-yard stare that Marcus had seen in combat veterans, the look of someone who'd witnessed too much. But she was here, she was present, that was something. "Can I tell you something about Rex?" Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's been trained to help people who have been through scary things. He's helped find lost children. He's comforted people after accidents. He even helped a little boy who was too afraid to go to the dentist. Rex sat right there in the dentist's office with him. True story." Emma's gaze shifted from Marcus to Rex and stayed there. The dog remained perfectly still, a furry statue of patience. "The thing about Rex," Marcus continued, "is that he's really good at keeping people safe. When he's around, bad things don't happen. It's like he has a special power. And you know what? He thinks you're pretty special too." Marcus gave a subtle hand signal, and Rex slowly lowered himself until he was lying flat on the hallway floor, making himself as non-threatening as possible. His head rested on his paws, his body language screaming, "I'm safe. I'm gentle. I'm here for you." Emma took one step forward, then another. She was now standing just a few feet from Rex, close enough to reach out and touch him if she wanted. "He won't move unless you want him to," Marcus said. "You're in charge here, Emma, always. Rex only does what makes people feel comfortable." For a long moment, Emma just stood there, internal war visible on her small face. Fear battled curiosity. Trauma warred with a child's natural connection to animals. Her hand lifted slightly, then dropped, lifted again. Then she sat down, right there in the hallway, cross-legged, about 2 feet from Rex's head. Her stuffed rabbit sat in her lap, and she stared at the dog with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. Marcus held his breath. "Don't push, don't rush, let her come to it." 5 minutes passed with no one moving. Then Emma's hand, still clutching the rabbit's ear, extended toward Rex. Her fingers hovered above his head, trembling, not quite touching. Rex, with the wisdom of a therapy dog years in the making, did something remarkable. He lifted his head just slightly and very gently, very carefully, pressed the top of his head against Emma's palm. The contact lasted only a second before he lowered his head again, but it was enough. Emma's eyes widened. Her fingers uncurled from the rabbit and touched Rex's fur, really touched it with intention and awareness. She stroked from the top of his head down to his neck, then did it again, and again. Marcus saw it happen, the moment something unlocked inside her. Her rigid shoulders relaxed fractionally. Her breathing, which had been shallow and quick, deepened slightly. The terrible blankness in her eyes flickered with something that might have been the beginning of feeling safe. They sat there for 20 minutes, Emma slowly exploring Rex's fur with her hands, Rex accepting her attention with perfect stillness. At one point, Emma leaned forward and rested her forehead against Rex's neck, and Marcus had to blink back tears. The trust required for that simple gesture, from a child who'd learned that the world wasn't safe, that monsters were real, that hiding wasn't always enough, was staggering. When Martha peeked around the corner 30 minutes later, she found Emma sitting beside Rex, her small hand buried in his thick fur, eyes closed. It wasn't quite peace on her face, but it wasn't pure terror either. It was something in between, a child taking her first tentative steps back toward the world of the living. "We'll come back tomorrow," Marcus whispered to Martha as they prepared to leave. "Same time, we'll build on this. By the time the hearing comes, Rex will be her safe place, her anchor. When she has to face those men, she won't be alone." That night, Martha called Detective Sarah Mitchell with news that made the detective's heart leap. Emma had eaten dinner. Not much, but she'd eaten. And more importantly, at bedtime, when Martha had tucked her in, Emma had whispered a single word, the first word she'd spoken since the attack. "Rex." Over the next 5 days, Marcus and Rex visited every morning and afternoon. Each visit, Emma came a little further out of her shell. By day 2, she was sitting beside Rex for the entire hour-long visit, sometimes talking to the dog in a whisper that Marcus couldn't quite hear. By day 3, she'd smiled, a tiny, fragile thing, but unmistakably a smile, when Rex gently took a treat from her hand. On day 4, something remarkable happened. Emma, who had refused to leave her grandmother's house since the attack, asked if she could take Rex for a walk in the backyard. Marcus said yes, and they spent an hour outside, Emma holding Rex's leash while the patient dog walked slowly beside her, matching her small steps perfectly. That evening, Martha found Emma drawing pictures for the first time since the trauma. The drawings were dark, lots of black and brown scribbles, images that clearly represented fear and confusion. But in one corner of every picture there was a dog. A big, brown dog with kind eyes. "She's coming back," Dr. Patel told them during a consultation on day 5. "The selective mutism is breaking. She's speaking to her grandmother in short sentences now. She asks about Rex constantly. 'Officer Webb, whatever you're doing, it's working.' That dog has become her emotional support system, her safe place in a world that suddenly became terrifying." On day 6, the evening before the preliminary hearing, Marcus brought Rex for one final visit. This time when he arrived, Emma ran to the door. Actually ran. She dropped to her knees and threw her arms around Rex's neck, and for the first time since the attack, she spoke in a full, clear sentence. "I missed you, Rex." Marcus had to turn away to hide his emotion. Martha openly wept. In that moment, they all understood something profound. They'd witnessed a small miracle. A severely traumatized child had found her way back to trust, to connection, to speech. All because of a dog who offered what humans couldn't: complete, unconditional acceptance without the weight of expectations. "Emma," Marcus said gently, kneeling beside her, "tomorrow you and Rex are going to go to a big room with a lot of people. It might feel scary, but Rex will be right beside you the whole time. He won't leave. And he needs you to be brave for him. Can you do that?" Emma looked at Rex, then at Marcus, then back at Rex. She nodded slowly. "Will the bad men be there?" she whispered, the first time she'd acknowledged the attack directly. Marcus's heart clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "They will be there, but they can't hurt you. Rex won't let them. I won't let them. And you're going to help make sure they can never hurt anyone else. You're going to be the bravest person in that room tomorrow." Emma buried her face in Rex's fur one more time, drawing strength from his solid, warm presence. "Okay," she whispered, "for Rex." As Marcus left that night, he looked back to see Emma waving from the window, her grandmother's arms around her. The little girl who'd been locked in traumatic silence had found her voice again. Tomorrow, that voice would either secure justice or let monsters walk free. Everything depended on 2 words Marcus prayed Emma would be strong enough to speak. The county courthouse stood like a fortress of granite and glass against the gray morning sky, its imposing columns casting long shadows across the stone steps. By 7:30 a.m., news vans already lined the street, satellite dishes extended like mechanical flowers reaching for the sun. Reporters clutched coffee cups and checked their cameras, voices buzzing with anticipation. Word had leaked about the unprecedented nature of today's preliminary hearing, and the media smelled a story. Courthouse sources confirm a therapy dog will be present during testimony. 3-year-old witness expected to identify home invasion suspects. Legal experts question the constitutionality. Inside, the building hummed with an energy that had nothing to do with the typical Monday morning docket. Court staff whispered in clusters. Attorneys arriving for other cases detoured past Courtroom 4, craning their necks for a glimpse of the spectacle everyone was talking about. Even the security guards at the metal detectors seemed more alert than usual, their conversations punctuated with references to that kid and the police dog. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, her stomach churning with a mixture of hope and dread. She'd barely slept, running through every possible scenario. What if Emma froze? What if the defense successfully blocked Rex from the courtroom? What if the judge found the whole thing too irregular and dismissed the case before it even began? She found Prosecutor David Ramirez in his office, surrounded by law books and case files, his tie already loosened despite the early hour. His desk was a war room of legal precedents, printouts of cases from California, Colorado, and Washington, where therapy dogs had been allowed in courtrooms. Highlighted passages marked the arguments he'd need. Judge Chen agreed to hear arguments at 8:30, Ramirez said without preamble. Defense filed a motion to exclude Rex last night. Krantz is claiming it's prejudicial, that a police dog creates unfair sympathy, that it violates his client's right to a fair hearing. Can he win that argument? Sarah asked. He shouldn't, there's precedent, but Chen is unpredictable and this is new territory for Ohio. Ramirez looked at her with bloodshot eyes. If she denies the motion to exclude, we proceed. If she grants it, Emma testifies alone, and we both know she's not ready for that. At 8:15, Officer Marcus Webb arrived through the courthouse's side entrance with Rex, avoiding the media circus out front. The German Shepherd wore his official K9 vest, looking every inch the professional police dog he was. But Marcus had added something special, a softer collar beneath his working one, the kind used for therapy animals, with Emma's name embroidered on it in purple thread. Martha Henderson arrived moments later with Emma, who clutched her grandmother's hand with white-knuckled intensity. The little girl wore a blue dress with small flowers on it. Martha had let her choose it herself that morning. Emma's hair was pulled back with butterfly clips, and she carried her stuffed rabbit under one arm. She looked impossibly small and vulnerable. Then Emma saw Rex. The transformation was instantaneous. Her grip on Martha's hand loosened. Her shoulders, which had been hunched up near her ears, relaxed slightly. She didn't smile. This was too serious for smiles, but the sheer terror in her eyes dimmed from blinding to bearable. "Rex," she whispered. The dog's tail wagged once in greeting, his professional demeanor softening just slightly in Emma's presence. Marcus led them to a private witness room where Emma could wait away from the chaos, and the moment the door closed, Emma sat on the floor beside Rex, her hands finding their familiar place in his fur. "How's she doing?" Sarah asked Martha quietly. "She threw up her breakfast," Martha admitted, her voice tight with worry. "She asked me 3 times if the bad men could get her. I told her no, but she's terrified, detective. Absolutely terrified. If it wasn't for that dog." She gestured helplessly at Rex, who sat like a furry sentinel beside Emma. "He's the only reason she's functioning at all." At 8:30, Judge Margaret Chen took the bench in Courtroom 4. She was a formidable woman in her early 60s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses that she peered over with an expression that had intimidated lawyers for 3 decades. Her reputation was legendary, fair but exacting, traditional but not unreasonable, and utterly immune to theatrics. The courtroom was packed. Media representatives filled the back rows. The defendants, Derek Vance and Marcus "Snake" Torelli, sat at the defense table in orange jumpsuits, their expressions carefully neutral but their eyes calculating. Their attorney, Richard Krantz, was a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who'd built a career on getting guilty men acquitted through technical loopholes and aggressive defense tactics. "Your Honor," Krantz began, standing with practiced confidence, "the defense moves to exclude the presence of any animal during these proceedings. The prosecution's request to allow a police dog, Your Honor, to accompany their witness is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner sympathy. The image of a small child with a police K-9 creates an inherent prejudice against my clients. It suggests they are so dangerous that even a 3-year-old needs police protection to testify against them." Ramirez rose immediately. "Your Honor, may I respond?" Judge Chen gestured for him to proceed, her expression unreadable. "Your Honor, the dog in question is not present as a police animal, but as a certified therapy support animal for a severely traumatized witness. The defense's characterization is intentionally misleading. Rex has been working with Emma Henderson for 6 days under the supervision of licensed trauma therapists. Without his presence, this child, who has suffered acute traumatic mutism, may not be able to testify at all. The defense isn't objecting to prejudice. They're objecting to the possibility that their victim might actually find the courage to identify them." "That's inflammatory, Your Honor," Krantz protested. "So is beating parents unconscious while their 3-year-old hides in a closet," Ramirez shot back. "Gentlemen," Judge Chen's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "Mr. Ramirez, you have case law supporting this request." "Extensive, Your Honor." Ramirez approached the bench with a thick folder. "People v. Chenault in California, 2011. State v. Devon in Washington, 2014. In Ray R.M. in Colorado, 2016. All cases where therapy dogs were permitted to accompany child witnesses who had experienced severe trauma. The dogs were found to be no more prejudicial than allowing a parent to sit nearby, which has been standard practice for decades." Judge Chen flipped through the cases, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Krantz, your response." "Those cases are from other jurisdictions and aren't binding here. Moreover, none of them involved a police dog. This animal is trained to attack, to intimidate, to represent law enforcement authority. Its very presence suggests my clients are dangerous criminals." "Your clients are charged with home invasion, aggravated assault, and robbery," Judge Chen said dryly. "The charges themselves suggest they're dangerous criminals. That ship has sailed, counselor." A ripple of suppressed laughter ran through the courtroom. Krantz's face reddened. "However," Judge Chen continued, "I am concerned about the unprecedented nature of this request in Ohio courts. Mr. Ramirez, has this child been evaluated by a licensed psychologist regarding her need for this accommodation?" "Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Sheila Patel, a pediatric trauma specialist, has submitted an affidavit stating that Emma Henderson is suffering from acute traumatic mutism, directly resulting from witnessing the assault on her parents. Dr. Patel states that the child has demonstrated significant improvement in her ability to communicate only when in the presence of the therapy dog, and that requiring her to testify without this support would likely result in her being unable to speak at all." "I want to see this child and this dog," Judge Chen announced. "Bailiff, please bring them in. I'll make my determination after observing the interaction." The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as the bailiff left. 3 minutes later, the side door opened, and Marcus entered with Rex on a short leash. Behind them came Emma, holding Martha's hand, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Emma's eyes went immediately to the defendant's table. When she saw Vance and Torelli, her entire body went rigid. Her face drained of color. A small sound, something between a whimper and a gasp, escaped her throat. She took a step backward, colliding with her grandmother's legs. "Emma," Marcus said quietly, kneeling down. "Look at Rex, just look at Rex." The little girl's terrified gaze tore away from the defendants and found the dog. Rex, sensing her distress, moved closer and pressed his solid warmth against her leg. Emma's hand released her grandmother's and grabbed Rex's fur with desperate intensity. Judge Chen watched this exchange with keen attention. After 30 years on the bench, she developed an instinct for genuine trauma versus manipulation. What she saw in Emma's face was real, raw terror, and the dog's presence was the only thing preventing complete panic. "Mr. Krantz," Judge Chen said slowly, "I've seen defendants bring support persons, religious texts, medication, and various comfort items to my courtroom. I once had a defendant who couldn't proceed without his lucky baseball. This child has endured a trauma that would break many adults, and she's being asked to confront her attackers in a formal, intimidating environment. If a dog helps her do that, I see no legal basis to exclude him." "Your Honor," Krantz began. "My ruling stands," Judge Chen interrupted firmly. "The therapy dog will be permitted to remain with the witness. However," she looked at Ramirez, "the dog will wear no police insignia or badges during testimony. He's here as a therapy animal, not as law enforcement. Officer Webb will remove any items that identify the dog as Police K-9. "Understood, Your Honor," Marcus said, already unbuckling Rex's official vest. Krantz sat down heavily, his jaw tight with frustration. At the defense table, Vance and Torelli exchanged glances. Their insurance policy, a traumatized child too scared to speak, had just been neutralized. Judge Chen looked at Emma, who was now sitting on the floor beside Rex, her face buried in his fur. "Young lady," the judge said, her voice gentler than anyone in the courtroom had ever heard it, "my name is Judge Chen. You don't have to be scared in my courtroom. Nobody here will hurt you. Do you understand?" Emma peeked up at the judge and gave a tiny nod. "Good, we're going to ask you some questions in a little while. Your friend Rex can stay right beside you the whole time. Does that sound okay?" Another small nod. Judge Chen looked at the courtroom, at the reporters with their notebooks poised, at the defendants trying to appear unconcerned, at the prosecutors who'd gambled everything on a child and a dog. "We'll take a 15-minute recess to allow everyone to settle. When we reconvene, the preliminary hearing will proceed." As people filed out for the break, Sarah Mitchell approached Marcus and Emma. The little girl was calmer now, breathing deeply while stroking Rex's fur in a rhythmic, soothing motion. "You can do this," Sarah told Emma gently. "You're the bravest person I know." Emma looked up at her with those enormous brown eyes, eyes that had seen too much but were finding their way back to courage. "Will Rex stay?" she whispered. "Every single second," Marcus promised. "I give you my word." Emma nodded solemnly, then leaned against Rex as if drawing strength from his solid presence. Outside, the gray clouds had begun to break, letting thin streams of sunlight through the courtroom windows. The moment of truth was coming. In 15 minutes, justice would hang on what a 3-year-old girl could say with a dog by her side. The entire courtroom held its breath, waiting. The 15-minute recess felt like 15 hours. In the witness preparation room, Emma sat on the floor with Rex, her small fingers tracing patterns in his fur, while Martha dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. Prosecutor David Ramirez reviewed his notes for the 100th time, knowing that everything he'd worked for in his 20-year career paled in comparison to the next 30 minutes. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about giving voice to a child who'd had everything stolen from her, including her sense of safety. Detective Sarah Mitchell stood by the window, watching clouds drift across the sky, thinking about all the victims she'd fought for over the years. None had been this young. None had been this fragile. The weight of it pressed on her chest like a physical thing. "She's ready," Marcus said quietly, though his own tension was evident in the set of his shoulders. Rex sensed it too. The dog's ears were alert, his body language protective as he stayed close to Emma. At 9:45 a.m. the bailiff knocked on the door. "Judge Chen is ready to reconvene." Martha knelt beside her granddaughter, taking the small face between her hands. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart. Just tell the truth. Rex will be right there. I'll be right there. You're safe." Emma nodded, but her breathing had quickened, her eyes wide with returning fear. She looked at Rex, who gazed back at her with that preternatural calm that only therapy dogs possess, a steadiness that seemed to say, "I've got you. Always." The courtroom had somehow grown more crowded during the break. Every seat was filled. Additional court staff lined the walls. The air crackled with anticipation and tension so thick it could be sliced. When Judge Chen took the bench, the room fell into absolute silence. "Mr. Ramirez, call your witness," Judge Chen said. "The people call Emma Henderson, Your Honor." The side door opened. Marcus entered first with Rex, the dog's therapy vest clearly visible. No police insignia, no badges, just a simple blue vest that read "Therapy Dog" in white letters. Behind them came Emma, holding her grandmother's hand, moving with the reluctant steps of someone walking toward something terrifying. Every eye in the courtroom fixed on the tiny figure in the blue flowered dress. Emma's gaze immediately found the defendant's table, and she froze mid-step. Derek Vance stared back at her, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes cold and calculating. Beside him, Marcus Snake. Torelli leaned back in his chair with studied casualness, but the snake tattoo on his wrist seemed to writhe in the fluorescent light. Emma's face went white. Her hand gripped Martha's with desperate strength. A small, panicked sound escaped her throat. "Emma," Marcus said softly, moving between her and the defendant's table, breaking the line of sight. "Look at me, just me and Rex. Nobody else matters." The little girl's terrified eyes shifted to Marcus, then dropped to Rex. The dog moved forward, pressing his solid warmth against her legs. Emma's free hand found his fur, clutched it like a lifeline. "That's it," Marcus murmured. "Just us. We're right here." The walk to the witness stand, barely 20 feet, took nearly a minute. Each step was a battle between courage and terror. Martha accompanied Emma to the witness box, which had been specially modified with a lower chair and a small step stool. Rex settled on the floor immediately beside Emma, close enough that she could reach down and touch him, which she did constantly, her fingers never leaving his fur for more than a few seconds. Judge Chen looked at the little girl with an expression that was somehow both stern and gentle. "Emma, my name is Judge Chen. I know this is scary, but you're doing great. Do you know what it means to tell the truth?" Emma nodded, her voice barely audible. "It means no lying." "That's right, and I need you to promise to tell the truth today. Can you do that?" "Yes." The word was so soft that the court reporter had to lean forward. Ramirez approached slowly, his movements deliberately non-threatening. He'd interviewed hundreds of witnesses, but never one this young, this traumatized. His own hands trembled slightly as he held a folder containing the photographs that would either secure justice or shatter this fragile child. "Emma, my name is Mr. Ramirez. I'm a lawyer, which means I help make sure bad people get in trouble when they do bad things. Is that okay?" Emma glanced at Rex, who looked up at her with those steady, reassuring eyes. She nodded. "Emma, do you remember a night when something scary happened at your house? The house where you lived with Mommy and Daddy?" The little girl's entire body tensed. Her breathing quickened. Her hand gripped Rex's fur so tightly that her knuckles went white. For a long moment, nobody thought she would answer. Then, barely audible, "Yes." "That must have been very scary. You don't have to tell me what happened unless you want to, but I need to ask you something important. Did you see the people who came into your house that night?" Tears welled in Emma's eyes. She looked down at Rex, who shifted slightly, pressing his head against her leg in a gesture of support. Martha, sitting in the front row, pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting her own tears. "Yes," Emma whispered. "Objection, Your Honor," Krantz rose sharply. "The witness is clearly in distress. This constitutes coercion of a minor witness. I move to." "Overruled," Judge Chen cut him off sharply. "The child is distressed because she's recounting a trauma, not because of the questioning. Proceed, Mr. Ramirez, but carefully." Ramirez nodded, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. He opened his folder and removed 6 photographs, laying them face down on a child-sized table that had been placed in front of the witness stand. "Emma, I have some pictures here. Some of these are pictures of the bad men who came to your house. Some are pictures of other people who didn't do anything wrong. I need you to look at these pictures and tell me if you see the bad men, but you don't have to do this if you're too scared. Rex is right there. Your grandma is right there. And nobody in this room will let anything bad happen to you. Do you understand?" Emma's chest was heaving now, her breathing rapid and shallow. Panic flickered across her face. She looked at the defendant's table. She couldn't help it, drawn by the same terrible magnetism that makes people look at car accidents. And when she saw Vance and Torelli staring back at her, a whimper escaped her throat. Marcus, standing just behind the witness box, spoke quietly. "Emma, look at Rex. Tell me what color his eyes are." The little girl's gaze snapped to the dog. "Be brown," she stammered. "That's right, and what color is his nose?" "Black." "Good, now touch his ears. How do they feel?" Emma's shaking hand stroked Rex's soft ears. "Soft. Very soft. Now, Emma, Rex needs you to be brave for him. Can you do that? Can you be brave for Rex?" The little girl looked down at the dog, who gazed back at her with absolute trust and calm. Something in his steady presence seemed to anchor her. Her breathing slowed fractionally. She nodded. "Your Honor, may I turn over the photographs?" Ramirez asked. "Proceed." One by one, Ramirez flipped the 6 photographs face up. 4 showed men who had nothing to do with the case, carefully selected to match approximate age and build. The 5th showed Derek Vance, his booking photo, showing his hard face and cold eyes. The 6th showed Marcus Torelli, the snake tattoo visible on his wrist, his expression one of barely concealed arrogance. Emma's entire body went rigid when the photos were revealed. Her hand froze in Rex's fur. Her eyes went wide, pupils dilating with recognition and terror. A sound escaped her, something between a gasp and a sob. The courtroom held its collective breath. Reporters leaned forward. Judge Chen's hand stilled on her gavel. The defendant stared at Emma with expressions that tried for unconcerned but couldn't quite hide the tension underneath. Everything, justice, safety, accountability, hung on what happened next. "Emma," Ramirez said gently, "do you see the bad men in these pictures?" Emma's hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. She reached toward the photographs, her finger hovering over them, trembling with such violence that her whole arm shook. Tears streamed down her face. Her breathing came in quick, panicked gasps. Rex, sensing her acute distress, did something remarkable. He stood up, breaking his sitting position, and pressed his entire body against Emma's legs. Then very gently he placed his large head directly on her lap, looking up into her face with those steady brown eyes that seemed to say, "I'm here. You're safe. You can do this." Emma's shaking hand dropped to Rex's head. She stroked his fur once, twice, 3 times. Each stroke seemed to transfer some of his calm into her. Her breathing steadied slightly. She looked at Rex, then at the photographs, then back at Rex, as if drawing courage from his presence. "Emma," Marcus said quietly from behind her, "Rex believes in you. We all believe in you. You're the bravest person in this room." The little girl took a deep, shuddering breath. Her finger, still trembling but with more purpose now, moved toward the photographs. The courtroom was so silent that the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed deafening. Emma's finger hovered over Derek Vance's photograph. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She swallowed hard, her throat working with effort. She looked down at Rex, who pressed his head more firmly against her, and suddenly the words came. "Bad man." 2 words barely above a whisper, but they shattered the silence like thunder. Gasps erupted throughout the courtroom. A reporter dropped her phone. The court stenographer's hands froze over her keys. Judge Chen's eyes widened fractionally. Martha Henderson sobbed openly, her hands covering her face. But Emma wasn't finished. Her finger moved to the second photograph, Marcus Torelli with his snake tattoo. Her voice was stronger now, as if speaking the first words had broken a dam inside her. "Bad man," she said again, louder this time. "He hurt Mommy, he hurt Daddy." The courtroom exploded. Spectators gasped and whispered. Krantz shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I object. The witness is—" "Silence!" Judge Chen's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "One more outburst from anyone and I'll clear this courtroom. Mr. Krantz, sit down. The child has identified the defendants. That's her right in her testimony." But Emma wasn't done. Something had broken free inside her. 3 months of silence, of trauma, of fear, all pouring out at once. She looked directly at Vance and Torelli, her small voice growing stronger with each word, as if Rex's presence had given her not just courage but power. "You were mean," she said, tears streaming down her face but her voice clear and strong. "You hurt my mommy. You hurt my daddy. You made me hide in the dark and I was scared. You're bad men. You're bad, bad, bad men." The raw emotion in her voice, the pain, the anger, the fear, but also the courage, struck everyone in the courtroom like a physical blow. Hardened court reporters wiped their eyes. Bailiffs looked away, blinking. Even Judge Chen had to clear her throat before speaking. At the defense table, Derek Vance and Marcus Torelli sat frozen, their carefully maintained facades crumbling. They'd counted on a silent, traumatized 3-year-old who couldn't testify. Instead, they faced a little girl who'd found her voice, and with it, the power to hold them accountable. Emma collapsed against Rex, sobbing into his fur, her small body shaking with the release of 3 months of held-back terror. But she'd done it. She'd spoken. She'd identified them. She'd been brave. And the entire courtroom knew that justice had just been served by the smallest, most courageous witness they'd ever seen. The courtroom remained frozen in the aftermath of Emma's testimony, as if everyone was collectively holding their breath, afraid that any movement might shatter the profound moment they'd just witnessed. Emma's sobs were the only sound, raw, heart-wrenching cries that seemed to release 3 months of pent-up terror and pain. Her small body curled around Rex, who sat absolutely still, absorbing her grief like the trained therapy animal he was, his brown eyes alert but calm, his presence an anchor in her storm. Martha Henderson couldn't contain herself any longer. She rose from her seat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face, and Judge Chen, breaking every protocol she'd upheld in 30 years, simply nodded permission. Martha rushed to the witness box and gathered her granddaughter into her arms, Emma still clinging to Rex's fur with one hand while the other grasped her grandmother's sleeve. "You did it, baby," Martha whispered, rocking Emma gently. "You were so brave, so brave. It's over now. You did it." But Prosecutor Ramirez knew it wasn't quite over. He glanced at Judge Chen, who gave him a subtle nod. There were questions that still needed answers, details that would strengthen the case beyond reasonable doubt. But looking at the traumatized child sobbing in her grandmother's arms, he made a decision that would define his career more than any victory ever could. "Your Honor," Ramirez said quietly, "the people have no further questions for this witness at this time. The identification is clear and unequivocal." Richard Krantz rose slowly from the defense table, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like armor that wasn't quite as protective as he'd thought. His clients had just been positively identified by an eyewitness, and the emotional impact of that testimony was devastating. Every person in the courtroom, including the judge, had just watched a 3-year-old find the courage to confront her nightmares. Cross-examining her would be career suicide, even if it was his legal right. "Your Honor," Krantz began, his voice careful, "the defense reserves the right to cross-examination, but given the witness's age and emotional state, we request that any such questioning be deferred to." "Denied," Judge Chen said flatly. "You have the right to cross-examine now, Mr. Krantz, or you waive that right. I will not subject this child to multiple court appearances. Make your choice." Krantz looked at his clients, who stared back with expressions that mixed anger and resignation. He looked at Emma, still crying into her grandmother's shoulder. He looked at the jury pool members who would eventually hear this case, knowing that any aggressive questioning of this child would turn them permanently against his clients. He was trapped, and he knew it. "The defense waives cross-examination at this time, Your Honor." A collective exhale seemed to move through the courtroom. Judge Chen nodded, her expression unreadable but her eyes reflecting something that might have been relief. "Emma Henderson is excused from testimony," the judge announced. "Mrs. Henderson, you may take your granddaughter home." Marcus helped Emma stand, the little girl's legs unsteady, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. Rex moved with her, his body pressed against her leg, providing support both physical and emotional. As they walked toward the exit, something extraordinary happened. One by one, people in the courtroom began to stand, not in protest or objection, but in respect. The bailiff stood first, then the court reporter, then the spectators in the gallery. Even the prosecutors and court staff rose from their seats. Within seconds, everyone in the courtroom, everyone except the defendants and their attorney, was standing in silent acknowledgement of the courage they'd just witnessed. Emma didn't notice at first, focused only on putting one foot in front of the other, on Rex's steadying presence, on getting out of this terrible room with its terrible memories. But as they reached the door, she glanced back. What she saw made her pause. All these adults, police officers, lawyers, people she didn't know, were standing, watching her with expressions of respect and admiration. A female bailiff, a tough-looking woman with gray-streaked hair, saluted her. A young prosecutor in the back row had tears streaming down his face. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Emma's expression shifted from terror to something else. Not quite pride, not quite understanding, but a dawning awareness that she had done something important, something that mattered. Marcus knelt beside her. "See that, Emma? Every single person in this room thinks you're a hero, because you are. You stood up to the bad men and you told the truth. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." Emma looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes, then down at Rex, who gazed back at her with unwavering devotion. She reached out and hugged the dog's neck with both arms, burying her face in his fur one more time. "Thank you, Rex," she whispered. "You made me brave." The door closed behind them, and the courtroom slowly returned to business. But the energy had fundamentally shifted. Judge Chen called for a brief recess, and in the hallway outside, reporters mobbed the exit, cameras flashing, voices calling out questions that went unanswered as Marcus and Detective Mitchell formed a protective corridor around Emma, Martha, and Rex, guiding them to a secure side exit. In a quiet room away from the chaos, Emma sat on the floor with Rex, her breathing finally returning to normal. The stuffed rabbit sat forgotten on a chair. She didn't need it anymore. She had something better, something real. Detective Sarah Mitchell knelt beside her. "Emma, I want you to know something. Because of you, because you were brave enough to speak up, those bad men are going to go to jail for a very long time. They won't be able to hurt anyone else. You saved other families from being scared like yours was. Do you understand that?" Emma nodded slowly, processing this information with the seriousness of someone much older. "Are Mommy and Daddy going to be okay now?" Sarah's heart clenched. Emma's parents were still in the hospital, still recovering from injuries that would take months to heal physically and years to heal emotionally. But she understood what Emma was really asking. Is my family safe now? Can we go back to being happy? They're getting better every day, Sarah said truthfully. And yes, sweetheart, everything is going to be okay now, because of you. Back in the courtroom, Judge Chen was delivering her ruling on the preliminary hearing. With Emma's positive identification and the supporting forensic evidence, she had no choice but to bind the case over for trial. The court finds sufficient probable cause to believe that Derek Vance and Marcus Torelli committed the crimes of home invasion, aggravated assault, and aggravated robbery, Judge Chen announced. The defendants are bound over for trial in the Court of Common Pleas. Bail is denied. The defendants will remain in custody pending trial. Krantz objected, of course. It was his job to object, but even he knew it was futile. The case was solid now, and his client's chances of acquittal had just evaporated in the face of a 3-year-old's testimony. As Vance and Torelli were led away in chains, both men looked diminished somehow, as if the reality of their situation had finally penetrated their arrogance. They'd been identified, named, called out by the smallest victim they'd ever created, and that victim had proven stronger than both of them combined. In the DA's office an hour later, Ramirez met with his team to discuss next steps. The defense will try to negotiate a plea, he predicted. Krantz knows that if this goes to trial, if a jury sees that little girl testify the way she did today, his clients are looking at maximum sentences. He'll push for a deal. What are you thinking? Sarah asked. 25 to life, no parole eligibility for 20 years minimum, both defendants, non-negotiable. Ramirez's voice was steel. What they did to that family, what they put that child through, they don't get to walk away easy. Sarah nodded her approval. Justice, real justice, was finally within reach. Meanwhile, at Martha Henderson's house, Emma sat in the backyard with Rex, throwing a tennis ball that the patient dog would retrieve and bring back, over and over, as if understanding that this simple, normal game was exactly what Emma needed. The repetitive motion, the predictability, the sheer normalcy of playing with a dog in a sunny backyard. It was healing in a way that therapy sessions and medications never could be. Martha watched from the kitchen window, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke with her son, Emma's father, who was still in the hospital but improving daily. She did it, James, Martha said, tears in her voice. Our little girl stood up there and she identified them. She was so brave, so incredibly brave. She paused, listening. Yes, Rex was with her the whole time, that dog. I don't know how to explain it, but he gave her something we couldn't. He gave her courage. In his hospital bed, James Henderson wept with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Pride in his daughter's strength, heartbreak that she'd needed to find it in the first place. Beside him, his wife Emma's mother, still bandaged and healing, squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her own face as she listened to Martha's account. Tell Emma we love her, James managed to say. Tell her we're so proud, and tell that dog, tell Rex thank you, tell him he's part of our family now. As the sun began to set over suburban Ohio, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma sat with Rex on the grass, her small hand resting on his fur, watching clouds drift by. The nightmares would still come. Healing from trauma wasn't linear or quick. The therapy sessions would continue for years. The scars, visible and invisible, would take time to fade. But something fundamental had shifted. Emma had found her voice. She had confronted her fears. She had spoken 2 words, bad man, that changed everything. 2 words that meant justice. 2 words that meant safety. 2 words that meant a 3-year-old girl had faced the monsters under her bed and named them, claimed power over them, refused to let them win. In courthouses across America, lawyers and judges and advocates took note. Emma's case would be studied, cited, used as precedent. The role of therapy animals in helping traumatized witnesses would be expanded, refined, protected. Other children, facing their own nightmares, would benefit from what Emma and Rex had proven today. But right now, in this moment, None of that mattered. What mattered was a little girl and a dog, sitting together in fatting sunlight, both of them exactly where they needed to be. Emma leaned against Rex, feeling his steady breathing, his solid warmth, his unwavering presence. "You're my best friend," she whispered. Rex's tail thumped once against the grass. Agreement, acceptance, promise. In a world that had become terrifying and uncertain, Emma had found one absolute truth. She wasn't alone. She would never be alone again. And sometimes that makes all the difference. The phone on Detective Sarah Mitchell's desk hadn't stopped ringing since 10 a.m. Local news stations wanted interviews. National networks were calling. CNN, ABC, NBC, everyone wanted the story of the 3-year-old who testified with 2 words and a therapy dog. By noon, Emma and Rex was trending on social media, with millions of people sharing the story, adding heart emojis and comments like, "This restored my faith in humanity," and heroes come in all sizes, and some have 4 legs. Sarah ignored most of the calls, but one she couldn't ignore came from her captain at 2 p.m. "Mitchell, get down here. We've got a situation." The situation turned out to be a conference room filled with representatives from police departments across the country. Chiefs from Atlanta, Seattle, Denver, and Portland sat around the table with notebooks and tablets, all asking the same questions. How did you train the dog? What protocols did you follow? Can this be replicated? Officer Marcus Webb stood at the head of the table, Rex sitting calmly beside him, suddenly the most famous police dog in America. Marcus looked overwhelmed but determined as he fielded questions. "The key isn't just having a therapy dog," Marcus explained for the 3rd time. "It's about building genuine trust over time." Emma and Rex spent 6 days together before the hearing. 6 days of no pressure, no expectations, just connection. You can't rush trauma recovery. You can't force a child to feel safe. Rex offered something consistent. He was the same calm, gentle presence every single time. That reliability is what allowed Emma to trust him. A female police chief from Chicago leaned forward. "Officer Webb, my city has hundreds of cases involving child witnesses who are too traumatized to testify. If we could implement even a fraction of what you've done here, the impact would be enormous. Would you be willing to consult on developing a program?" Marcus glanced at Rex, then at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I would." By the end of the meeting, Marcus had commitments from 15 police departments to visit and train their K-9 units in victim assistance protocols. A grant writer from the mayor's office promised funding. A representative from the American Kennel Club talked about certification programs. What had started as one desperate attempt to help one traumatized child was becoming a movement. But while the professionals planned and strategized, the real story was unfolding at County General Hospital, where Emma's parents were finally strong enough to see their daughter. Martha drove Emma to the hospital that afternoon, Rex in the back seat, because Emma had refused to go without him. The little girl held her stuffed rabbit in one hand and kept the other resting on Rex's head the entire 20-minute drive. She'd been talking more each day, full sentences now, though she still had nightmares that woke her screaming in the middle of the night. The therapist said that was normal, that healing wasn't linear, that she was making remarkable progress. "Mommy knows what you did," Martha said gently as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. "Daddy knows too. They're so proud of you, sweetheart." Emma's face was a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She hadn't seen her parents since the night of the attack, the night that had split her life into before and after. Part of her was desperate to see them, to confirm they were really okay. Another part was terrified of what seeing them might trigger, what memories might come flooding back. Marcus met them at the hospital entrance, having arranged special permission for Rex to visit the patient floors. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence, Emma pressed against Rex's side, drawing strength from his presence. Her parents were in a shared room, Emma's father James in one bed, her mother Claire in the other. Both were heavily bandaged still. James's face was discolored with fatting bruises, and he moved carefully, his broken ribs still healing. Claire's arm was in a cast, and healing cuts crisscrossed her face and arms from where she'd fought back against the attackers. But when Emma appeared in the doorway, both parents' faces transformed with joy and relief and desperate love. "Emma Bear," James whispered, using his pet name for her, his voice breaking. Emma froze in the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in her parents' injuries. For a terrible moment, everyone thought she might run. Then Rex stepped forward, and Emma's hand found his fur, and she walked slowly into the room. "Mommy, Daddy," her voice was tiny, uncertain. "Does it hurt?" Claire started crying immediately, reaching out her good arm. "Oh, baby, come here, sweetheart." Emma climbed carefully onto her mother's bed, avoiding the injured arm, and Claire wrapped her daughter in the tightest hug she could manage. James reached across the gap between the beds to touch Emma's hair, tears streaming down his bruised face. "We're okay," Claire whispered fiercely. "We're okay, and you're okay, and we're all going to be okay. My brave, brave girl. Grandma told us what you did. You were so strong." "Rex helped me," Emma said, looking back at the dog who sat quietly by the door with Marcus. "He made me not scared." "Then Rex is part of our family now," James said firmly. "Forever." They spent an hour together, Emma telling her parents about her days with Grandma, about learning to be brave, about the courtroom, though she skipped the scary parts. Her parents listened and held her and promised over and over that the bad men were going away forever, that they'd never come back, that their family would be safe again. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged both parents carefully, then ran back to Rex and threw her arms around his neck. "See," she told the dog, "Mommy and Daddy are getting better, just like you said they would." Rex had never said any such thing, of course, but in Emma's mind, his steady presence had communicated exactly that message, and in the ways that mattered most he had. That evening, the Henderson family's lawyer issued a statement on their behalf, announcing the formation of the Emma's Voice Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to pairing trained therapy dogs with traumatized child witnesses across the country. The foundation would provide funding for dog training, handler education, and legal advocacy to ensure therapy dogs could be present in courtrooms nationwide. Within 24 hours, the foundation's website crashed from traffic. Donations poured in from every state, $50 from a single mother in Texas, $10,000 from a tech CEO in California, $100 from a retired teacher in Maine. Everyone wanted to be part of this story, to contribute to something good rising from something terrible. By the end of the first week, the foundation had raised over $2 million. But the real vindication came 3 weeks later, when prosecutor David Ramirez called Detective Mitchell with news. "They took the deal," Ramirez said, satisfaction thick in his voice. "Both of them, 25 to life, no parole eligibility for 25 years. They'll be old men before they even have a chance at freedom. It's over, Sarah. We won." Sarah closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. "Emma won," she corrected quietly. "That little girl won." The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Emma didn't have to attend. The plea deal meant no trial, no testimony, no need for her to face Vance and Torelli again. But Martha asked if Rex could be there, sitting in the gallery, just in case any victim impact statements needed the kind of courage only a therapy dog could provide. Judge Chen agreed without hesitation. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed again. Media, supporters, other victims of violent crimes, all came to witness justice being served. Derek Vance and Marcus Torelli were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits and chains, their previous arrogance completely absent. They looked diminished, defeated, facing a quarter-century minimum behind bars because a 3-year-old girl had been brave enough to say 2 words. Judge Chen's sentencing statement was brief but powerful. "You invaded a home. You brutalized a family. You traumatized a child so severely that she couldn't speak for months. But that child found her courage, and she found her voice, and she ensured that you would face consequences for your actions. Emma Henderson may be the youngest person to testify in my courtroom, but she is also one of the bravest. Because of her, you will spend the next 25 years contemplating the lives you destroyed and the fear you caused. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell with finality. In the gallery, Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, as if he understood that justice had been served. The news coverage continued for weeks. Time magazine ran a feature titled "The Littlest Witness and Her Four-Legged Guardian." People magazine put Emma and Rex on the cover, with Emma's face obscured to protect her identity, but Rex looking noble and protective. Good Morning America did a segment on therapy dogs in courtrooms. The story captured something people desperately needed to believe: that courage could triumph over fear, that innocence could survive trauma, that sometimes heroes really did come with 4 legs and a tail. Officer Marcus Webb became the face of a new movement in law enforcement. He traveled to 18 cities in 3 months, training K-9 officers in victim assistance protocols. The Rex method, as it became known, was adopted by police departments in 43 states. Universities began studying the psychological impact of therapy animals on trauma recovery. Law schools added sections on accommodating vulnerable witnesses to their trial practice courses. And at the center of it all was a simple truth: one dog's patience and one child's courage had changed the justice system forever. 6 months after the sentencing, Emma started kindergarten. She still saw Dr. Patel weekly for therapy. She still had nightmares sometimes. But she also laughed again, played with other children, and talked about becoming a police officer when she grew up, so I can have a partner like Rex. Every Saturday, without fail, Marcus brought Rex to visit. The dog was officially retired from active police duty now, transitioning to full-time therapy work. He and Emma had become inseparable. Their bond, forged in a courtroom under impossible circumstances, had only deepened with time. On one particularly beautiful Saturday afternoon, Sarah Mitchell stopped by Martha's house to find Emma and Rex playing in the backyard. The little girl was teaching Rex to, mostly involved him sitting patiently while she twirled around him singing off-key. "She's really okay," Sarah said wonderingly to Martha as they watched from the porch. "She's getting there," Martha corrected gently. "Some days are harder than others, but that dog, Detective, I don't know how to explain it, but Rex saved her in ways medicine and therapy couldn't. He gave her back her voice, and with it he gave her back her childhood." Sarah watched Emma laugh as Rex gently caught a ball she'd thrown, then brought it back for another round. The little girl who'd been locked in traumatic silence was now chattering constantly, asking endless questions, singing songs, being exactly what a 5-year-old should be. 2 words, Sarah murmured. That's all it took to change everything, 2 words. "Bad man," Martha said softly. "The 2 most important words I've ever heard." They stood in comfortable silence, watching a little girl and a dog play in the afternoon sun, a scene of perfect, ordinary joy that had once seemed impossible. Justice had been served, healing had begun, and a 3-year-old and a German shepherd had shown the world that courage comes in all sizes, and that sometimes the bravest voices are the smallest ones. Emma's voice had been stolen by violence and trauma. Rex had helped her find it again. And together they had changed everything. 1 year after that transformative day in court, Emma Henderson stood at the front of a bright, newly renovated community center, holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. Her dark curls were pulled back with butterfly clips, and she wore a purple dress. Her favorite color now, she'd told everyone, because it was brave and pretty at the same time. Beside her, sitting with the perfect posture of a professional therapy dog, was Rex, his graying muzzle the only sign of his advancing age. The banner above them read, "Emma's Voice Foundation National Training Center, Grand Opening." The room was packed with police officers, K-9 handlers, child advocates, trauma therapists, and reporters from across the country. Emma's parents, James and Claire Henderson, stood nearby, both fully recovered now, though James still walked with a slight limp and Claire had a thin scar along her jawline, permanent reminders of that terrible night that seemed like a lifetime ago. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Martha whispered, kneeling beside her granddaughter. Emma nodded solemnly, then looked down at Rex. "Am I doing this right, Rex?" The dog's tail wagged once and Emma's face broke into a confident smile. She'd learned over the past year that Rex's responses, a tail wag, a gentle lean, those steady brown eyes, were his way of saying, "You've got this. You always have." 1 year ago, Marcus Webb announced to the crowd, his voice thick with emotion, a little girl found the courage to speak 2 words that changed not just one case, but an entire system. Today, because of her bravery, we're opening this center to train therapy dogs and their handlers to work with traumatized witnesses across the nation. Emma, would you like to say anything before we cut the ribbon? Everyone expected Emma to be shy, to perhaps whisper a few words or simply shake her head. Instead, the 6-year-old stepped forward with Rex at her side, looked out at the crowd of adults with those enormous brown eyes that had seen too much but chosen to see hope anyway, and spoke clearly. "When the bad men came to my house, I got really scared, so scared I couldn't talk anymore. But then Rex helped me be brave, and now I want to help other kids be brave too, so if you're scared, it's okay. Rex and his friends are going to help you, you just have to try." The applause was thunderous. Several hardened police officers wiped at their eyes. Sarah Mitchell, standing in the back, felt tears streaming down her face, tears of pride, of relief, of witnessing something extraordinary. Emma cut the ribbon with Marcus's help, and the crowd surged forward to tour the new facility. The building housed training rooms where handlers learned specialized techniques for working with trauma victims. There were comfortable meeting spaces designed specifically for children, with soft furniture, gentle lighting, and toys. A veterinary suite ensured the therapy dogs received top-tier medical care. And perhaps most importantly, there was a courtroom simulator where children could practice testifying with their therapy dogs before facing the real thing. "We've already certified 43 dog handler teams," Marcus explained to a group of visiting police chiefs, Rex lying calmly at his feet while children from a visiting school group took turns gently petting him. Each team goes through 6 months of intensive training. The dogs learn to read trauma responses, to provide non-intrusive comfort, to remain calm in high-stress environments. The handlers learn child psychology, trauma-informed care, and legal protocols for courtroom accommodations. "And it's working?" asked a skeptical-looking chief from a major metropolitan department. 63 children have testified with therapy dog support since Emma's case, Sarah Mitchell interjected, stepping forward with a folder full of data. 63 children who might otherwise have been too traumatized to speak. The conviction rate in those cases is 94%. But more importantly, follow-up studies show these children recover faster, experience fewer PTSD symptoms, and report feeling safer throughout the legal process. This isn't just about convictions, it's about healing. The chief nodded slowly, clearly convinced. "Sign us up. We've got a backlog of cases with child witnesses who won't talk, if this can help even a few of them." "It will help all of them," Emma's voice piped up from behind them. She'd wandered over with a juice box, Rex trailing patiently behind her. "Rex helped me, and he can help them too. Dogs are really good at making people not scared." The police chief knelt down to Emma's level. "You know what, young lady? I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for being brave enough to show us the way." Emma beamed, then skipped off to where her parents were talking with a documentary film crew. The past year had been full of moments like this, Emma gradually transforming from victim to advocate, her story inspiring changes in courtrooms from California to Maine. The legal landscape had shifted dramatically. 17 states had passed Emma's law legislation, explicitly guaranteeing the right of traumatized child witnesses to have therapy animals present during testimony. Another 12 states had similar bills in progress. The American Bar Association had issued guidelines for accommodating therapy animals in courtrooms. Law schools were teaching the precedent set by Emma's case in their trial advocacy courses. But the real impact was measured in individual lives changed. There was 7-year-old Michael in Oregon, who'd witnessed a violent assault and couldn't speak about it until a golden retriever named Buddy sat beside him in court. He'd found his voice and identified his mother's attacker. There was 9-year-old Jasmine in Florida, victim of prolonged abuse, who testified with a Labrador named Sunny and finally escaped her tormentor. There was 5-year-old David in Texas, who'd seen things no child should see, and found the courage to speak with a border collie mix named Hope pressed against his side. 63 children, 63 stories of courage, facilitated by dogs trained in the protocols developed from Emma's case. 63 families finding justice because one little girl and one German shepherd had shown them the way. As the grand opening celebration continued, Detective Sarah Mitchell found herself in a quiet corner with Marcus and Rex. The dog was older now. At 7 years old, he was slowing down, spending more time in therapy work than active police duties. But his eyes were still bright, his dedication still absolute. "You know what the craziest part is?" Sarah mused, scratching behind Rex's ears. "None of this was planned. We were desperate, throwing a Hail Mary, hopping against hope that a dog could reach a traumatized kid. And it worked. Not just worked, it changed everything." "It worked because Rex is special," Marcus said, pride evident in his voice. "But also because Emma was ready to be brave. She just needed something, that felt safe enough to be brave with." "They needed each other," Sarah agreed. "The perfect partnership at the perfect moment." Across the room, Emma was showing a group of children the training room, where she'd first learned to work with Rex. She demonstrated the hand signals, explained how Rex knew when she was scared, described the courtroom and how Rex had sat right beside her the whole time. "And then I said, 'Bad man,'" Emma told her rapt audience, "and everyone knew I was telling the truth because Rex was there. Dogs don't lie, so people know you're not lying either." Her logic was 6-year-old simple, but also profound. The presence of a therapy dog did more than provide comfort. It provided credibility, a visible symbol that this child had support, had courage, had truth on her side. That evening, after the celebration wound down and most guests had departed, the Henderson family, Marcus, Rex, and Sarah gathered in the center's main room. Emma sat on the floor with Rex, her parents on a nearby couch, everyone basking in the glow of a day that represented not just an opening, but a promise kept. "I got something today," James Henderson said, pulling out his phone. "An email from a father in California. His daughter was attacked last year and couldn't testify. He heard about Emma's Voice Foundation, about the therapy dogs, and he reached out. His daughter starts working with a dog named Bear next week." His voice cracked with emotion. "He said to tell Emma thank you, that his family has hope again because of her." Emma looked up from where she was lying against Rex's side. "Can we help all the kids?" she asked seriously. "All the ones who are scared?" "We're going to try, sweetheart," Claire said, her own eyes bright with tears. "Every single one we can reach." "Good," Emma declared. "Because being scared is really, really bad, but having a friend like Rex makes it better." Martha Henderson had been quietly documenting the day with her camera, but now she set it aside and looked at the group assembled in this room that existed, because one terrible night had somehow transformed into something beautiful. "You know what I think about sometimes," Martha said softly. "That night when Emma was hiding in that closet, I think about how different things could have been, if she'd been found, if she'd been hurt, if she'd never spoken again." She paused, composing herself. "But instead, she found her voice. And with it, she's giving voice to so many others. That's not just justice, that's redemption." Sarah pulled out a folder she'd been carrying. I brought something to show everyone. Remember I mentioned the conviction rate? Well, I have some of the letters here. Letters from other children, other families. She began reading. Dear Emma, I was really scared to talk about the bad thing that happened. But then I met a dog named Cooper and he helped me be brave like you. Thank you. Sophia, age 8. Emma, because of you I got to have a dog named Max with me in court. I told the truth and the bad person went to jail. You're my hero. Kevin, age 6. To the girl with the dog, my sister can't write yet but she wanted me to tell you that her dog Ruby makes her feel safe like your dog makes you feel safe. Thank you for helping kids. Anna, age 10, writing for her sister Mia, age 4. By the time Sarah finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Rex seemed to sense the emotional weight, pressing closer to Emma and looking up at her with those wise, gentle eyes. Rex, Emma said solemnly, cupping the dog's face in her small hands, you're the bestest friend ever. You saved me and now you're saving lots of kids. You're a hero. Rex's tail thumped against the floor, once, twice, 3 times, his version of accepting the honor. Marcus cleared his throat roughly. Rex is officially retiring from active police duty next month. He'll be 7.5 past prime for patrol work, but he's not retiring from this. He gestured around the training center. He's going to be our demonstration dog, helping train the next generation of therapy canines, teaching them what he knows about courage, patience, and helping kids find their voices. And when Rex gets too old, Emma asked, concern flickering across her face. Then we'll have dogs he's trained carrying on his legacy, Marcus promised. Rex's puppies, Rex's protégés. The Rex method will continue helping kids for decades to come. Some of the best therapy dogs in the country will be able to trace their training back to this guy right here. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She hugged Rex tightly, and the dog accepted the embrace with his characteristic patience, as if he'd always known this was his destiny, not chasing criminals or sniffing out drugs, but sitting quietly beside a scared child and helping them find the courage to speak. As night fell and everyone prepared to leave, Emma stood at the center's window, looking out at the lights of the city. Rex stood beside her, and she rested her hand on his head in that familiar gesture that had become their signature. You know what, Rex, Emma said quietly. I think maybe bad things happen so good things could happen too. I was really scared, but now we're helping other kids not be scared. That's pretty good, right? Rex's answer was to lean against her, solid and warm and steady. The same answer he'd given a year ago when a traumatized 3-year-old had needed someone to believe in. The same answer that had changed everything. In the parking lot, as families departed and officers loaded equipment, Sarah Mitchell stood with Martha Henderson, both women watching the building where so much hope now lived. You know what the best part is, Sarah said. The bad guys, Vance and Torelli, they thought they'd won. They thought they'd broken Emma so completely she'd never tell. They thought they'd get away with it. But they didn't count on Rex, Martha finished. They didn't count on Emma, Sarah corrected. Rex was the tool, the bridge, the support, but Emma, that little girl, she's the one who chose to be brave. 3 years old, traumatized beyond what most adults could handle, and she found a way to fight back. Not with violence or anger, but with truth. 2 words, bad man. That's all it took to bring down 2 criminals and start a revolution in victim advocacy. Martha smiled through her tears. My granddaughter, the revolutionary, her parents would be so proud. She paused, then laughed. Her parents are proud, we all are. Inside the center, Emma had found a marker and was drawing on a whiteboard that had been set up for training sessions. When she finished, she called everyone over to see. The drawing was simple stick figures, really, but the meaning was clear. A small figure stood beside a large dog shape. Above them, Emma had written in careful, slightly crooked letters, "Be brave, you can do it." Below she'd signed it, Emma and Rex. That's for all the kids who come here, Emma explained. so they know they can be brave too. Marcus photographed the drawing, knowing it would become the unofficial motto of the foundation. Those words, "Be brave, you can do it," would appear on training materials, website headers, and motivational posters in police departments across the nation. 1 year ago, Emma Henderson had been a victim, a traumatized child who'd lost her voice to violence and fear. Today, she was a survivor, an advocate, and inspiration. 1 year ago, Rex had been a working police dog assigned to an unusual case. Today, he was a pioneer in therapy animal work, his methods studied and replicated nationwide. Together, they had proven that courage comes in unexpected packages, that healing takes many forms, that sometimes the most powerful testimony comes from the smallest witnesses. That 2 words, spoken with a dog by your side, can change the world. As everyone finally departed that night, Marcus stayed behind with Rex, doing one final walkthrough of the facility. In the main training room, he paused before a wall that had been designated for photos and testimonials. The first photo, prominently displayed in the center, showed Emma and Rex on the day of her testimony, her small hand buried in his fur, his steady gaze fixed on her face, both of them showing the world what true partnership looked like. "You did good, buddy," Marcus said quietly, kneeling beside his partner. "You saved her, and in doing so, you've saved so many others." Rex's tail wagged slowly, and he pressed his head against Marcus's chest, his way of saying that he'd just been doing his job, just being who he was meant to be. But Marcus knew better. What Rex had done was extraordinary, not because he'd performed some heroic act or mastered some impossible skill, but because he'd offered something simple and profound: unwavering presence, unconditional support, a safe place in a terrifying world. He'd given Emma her voice back, and she, in turn, had given voice to countless others. 2 words that changed everything: bad man. 2 beings that changed the system: a girl and her dog. One legacy that would endure: Emma's voice, speaking hope into darkness, courage into fear, justice into silence. As Marcus turned off the lights and locked the door, he looked back one more time at that photograph, that moment frozen in time when everything changed. "Come on, Rex," he said softly. "Let's go home. Tomorrow we start training the next generation. Tomorrow we help more kids find their courage." Rex's tail wagged in agreement as they walked into the night, the lights of the Emma's Voice Foundation glowing behind them like a beacon of hope. The smallest voice had spoken. The world had listened. And nothing would ever be the same again. The end.